How's it going, everybody? You're listening to the Let's Talk podcast, the show that brings you the latest in relevant and current trends and conversations about our daily living, the Bible, and also some very fun and unexpected points of view. With your hosts, Joey Santos and Brad Wilson.
Well, so let's get started. This is November. This one we're going to publish this. So, Brad, how you doing?
I'm a little tired. Other than that, I'm doing
Just quite a bit of driving there.
Yeah, a little recent driving.
Like a 24-hour turnaround to Michigan. That's like a
Yeah.
record. Is that a record?
It might be, but at least my gas mileage is good on the highway.
Okay, that's bad. That helps.
Now, gas prices in Michigan are terrible. It was like $4.30 for cheap gas, a gallon.
We had
Not good.
the church the bar cookout last Saturday. It was great. We raised $1,500 for this cause in 3.5 hours. So selling burgers and hot dogs, which that's not bad.
Now, the weather was good.
The weather was perfect, and but talking about gas mileage, I took the church van to carry the stuff, and it's showing like 11 miles per gallon. It's like, what
Yeah.
is that?
Yeah, those things have seen better gas mileage days.
So let me just let's just talk about. We're heading to the end of the year here, right? So we're talking about our favorite time of the year, holiday season, family. You and I
Yep.
really kind of one of the few things we're on the same page is how we feel about the holidays.
Yeah.
But before we get there, let's do a little recap of this last few weeks talking about money, because it's not an easy thing to talk about in church. We did this like literally 4 weeks ago before we got into the series. And we have a very clear prayer that the church would listen and the church would not see this as, us asking for money, but this is really about each one of us have the clear sense of a stewardship assignment from God, and how we should manage the money that God entrusts us, which is 100% of what we have. But let's just do a little bit of inventory here. How you feel like the series went? How do you feel like that? How do you feel like moving forward? What does it mean for the church?
That's a good question. I think the series, like you said, whatever the reason we start talking about these things in church. Sometimes it'd almost be easier just to talk politics, even though that's changed in church today. That people, they get weird about money, and I don't know if because of how it is, I don't know if we can ever talk about money in church without it being weird, unless it's, sometimes I think people start churches because it allows them to create a DNA and it allows them to create something that, hey, this is a part of who we are. So if you start a church, and I don't know if people would do that, but money's a more common conversation about it changes it. But I think that for people, because a lot of people grab the books and the workbooks, I think it's been a good series. I mean, the teaching with it has been great, but you never really can tell till afterwards the results of it. You could say there's various reasons for it, but there's certain things you're preaching, and you can tell with people that they're tracking with you about it. And I just think it's one of those where, in particular with, and even though it's different now, when the mega church era was at its peak, I think sometimes people struggled with it because with the money aspect is people today seem more than any to question anything and everything. So they want to know that it's being put to good use. But as we said with this, it's really trying to help our people and in this past Sunday, talking to them about really if there's a commitment with this, is the commitment more than anything I'm concerned with is not the giving to the church, and that's secondary to where you at with God, and are you seeing what you have that God's working with you, and it comes from Him, because that sets up and changes the whole dynamic of everything. Like when we realize in our life, okay, when we view what we have as, hey, these are blessings from God, how we use that and how we work with others, I think shifts in versus the mindset being of, hey, this is mine and I don't want to share with anyone and I don't want to do anything for anyone else. Those are two different mindsets, which they're both in the church.
I know. I was in a conversation with some pastors a few months ago, and the question that one of the pastors asked in this roundtable was, what would I rather have, a church of 10 million people or 100,000 churches with 10 people? And it's an interesting question because there's pros and cons on both sides. They're good and bad on both sides. But the thing, like, one of the things that came up was, well, 100,000 churches with 10 people, it's a level of community that we want to experience. The power and capacity of a 10 million church people can revolutionize a city.
Yeah.
Can revolutionize. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's not an easy question to answer because of that. And I look at, and we talked about this before, is I think when it comes to money in the church, culturally, we got hurt by bad actors.
Yeah.
As a church. You know, from every side of the spectrum you want to look at it. So every time you go up and say, hey, look what we can do, but we need resources for that, and automatically people may resort to, well, I'm not sure what you're going to do with my money. And I want people to listen to this because that's the key, is you may question what somebody else is going to do with the money, but at the end of the day, if you're a Christ follower, you don't have another option to say, this is actually not my money. Now, that's the key.
Yeah.
I think you got to ask yourself the question first, are you actually a Christ follower? Because as a disciple of Christ, those are not one of the non-negotiables, right? It's love people is a non-negotiable. It's not like I can love half of the people and another half I can just like, I don't know. No, as a true disciple of Christ, loving people is not non-negotiable. Giving all your resources sacrificially, because sacrificially means I'm giving up myself here, and that's hard.
Yeah.
To give it all to God, that means give it all to God, and a true disciple of Christ. So, I think before people ask the question, "What do you do with my money?" You got to ask yourself, "Am I a true disciple of Christ?"
Yeah.
Am I a true follower of Christ?
And that's really where I think the series went. Because one of the questions I was asked on Sunday is that, and it's an interesting thing to think about. I said, if you can't trust God with your finances, you can't trust him with your finances, how in the heck are you going to trust him with your eternity or your salvation? I mean, it makes no sense.
I know, right?
It makes zero sense.
No.
And just like it goes back, and then you can take in other areas. And one of the things we said in there is because I think sometimes people think, well, preacher's just making this up. And I'm like, listen, I'm not. Trust me, if I wanted to, and you'd probably agree with this, with things in ministry as pastors. If we wanted to, it'd be much better to go down the Jimmy Swaggart or the Joel Osteen tracks of just telling people what they want to hear.
Oh man, gloves are off now.
And kind of just going out there and just preaching fluff pieces that would be the easy thing to do of like, hey, because it goes back to, well, I just want everyone to like me. And for me, the driver with it is I want to make sure first and foremost that what I do, that it's falling in line with God and that God is pleased with what I'm doing. And so I said, one of the things I said on Sunday with it is we understand what it's like to, it's like with a lot of things, like you said, our commitment level to it and our relationship with God is there's certain things in our life that all of us have where, whether it's with our kids, there's stuff with my kids, I love them, but there's non-negotiables that if they don't do it, there's going to be repercussions. But it's funny with God that even people in the church, like I know some people in the church that as parents, man, they rule with an iron fist. But then when it comes to God, they're like, well, this is negotiable, this is negotiable, this is negotiable. And you think, I wonder sometimes if God thinks, man, if he just kind of sometimes chuckles and says, man, you're funny because the expectations you have for everyone else in your life, that if they don't meet one, you're ready to be done with them. Yet, what if I operated with you the way you operate with these people? And that's the thing. People are just like, yeah, let's just preach a fluff piece. Let's not go down that road. But I don't know. I feel that more. I think it's in our culture. I feel that there's more of a shift, and maybe that question you go back to. One church with 10 million people versus 100,000 churches with 10 people in them. Sometimes I think the smaller the place, the more committed the people may be. Mm-hmm. Because you can, in large places, you can hide.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's easy to hide in a big church. You walk in, nobody notices you. You can do your thing, and
you can sit and take.
Exactly, and you can just take that as a rule of life. I think part of the challenge for us as pastors and leaders is going to take boldness to do this. I think what people don't realize is, I think it's interesting. We're recording this is October 26, 2022, and I always curious, like if we look a year from now, 2 years from now, we'll go back to this podcast, and remember that we chose to talk about money in probably the worst time possible for us, in a transition period that has not been easy, post-pandemic. Mm-hmm. And here we are making a decision to no, we're going to talk about this. And I wanted the audience to really, really understand that this was hard. It was a hard decision because of that, because we know that talking about money in church scares people away. Talking about money in church, we will not be doing our job as leaders if we had not done that.
Yeah.
And I wanted people to really understand that it was not an easy decision, it was the right decision.
Yeah, and like I said, with it is it's hard, and people, I mean, I get it. People will be, and I said it a couple weeks ago, I was like, we were talking about tithing, I was like, some people are probably like, oh yeah, we knew just because looking at the dates going back to it, and there's a part of me that, okay, when they did this, affirmation thing in June, I'm sitting down there counting down the days. And I'm like, this is awesome. I mean, 4 months into it, and then we're jumping into this. And I know people will be like, well, you can't get away with it. But it really was this thing with like Lindsay and I talking through this, what really spoke to us were less with things of the church, but from a personal perspective, the idea of, man, we want to experience the financial freedoms and the blessings that God has for us, because these blessings that we're talking about, it's not like we're moving past the church and trying to get people. This is individually. Mm-hmm. I got a conversation. I was helping my dad yesterday, and case in point, I told him, I was like, yeah, we're going through this, and because I said, hey, when the boys have kids, and Lord willing, it's down the road a little bit. The surprise is like I want to be able to put some significant money, because I don't have to worry about it, in funds for them that when they're born, say, hey, whether it's granddaughters, grandsons that they can use for college, they can use for a down payment. And my dad's like, well, he's like, yeah. Well, because you know that I'm not leaving you anything. I was like, yeah, I'm not as surprised by it. And I look at this stuff and I was kind of laughing, but it's like for my thing with our families is it's crazy, the Bible in there, it talks about the generous and the benefits of leaving an inheritance, something not for your kids, for your grandkids. So it's like Kyle, Ryan, Connor, Ethan, and Winston. Sorry, guys, but
Exactly.
for us, the Bible says,
Well,
put you guys at the back
You know,
burner.
you and I, we inherited Golden Corral, not a 5-star hotel. So it's
Yeah.
like,
yeah. I mean, that's
I mean,
very descriptive of many aspects of my life. I look at that stuff and I think
I know.
my friends their parents have nice vehicles, and I'd get stuck with the Chevy Lumina minivan. It's like, what do you do with this thing? Call it the Land Shark and roll out, man.
I was talking in the bar Sunday between one of the questions you asked, and it was about, I don't remember necessarily right now, like specifically, it was about like giving our resource, trusting our resource to God. And I told them, I said, we all come from different backgrounds. So first of all, don't take this question personally,
Yeah.
because we have different calls in life. And I said, let me give an example. I said, my dad had absolutely no financial control in his life. My dad was a pastor, but his lack of financial control is because he gave everything he had.
Yeah.
Everything. So he never planned for it. He never thought in his mind, let me plan in case someday, is not out of the blue the church fire pastors. So one day the church fire him and he doesn't have any place to lean on. He never thought of that.
Mm-hmm.
He never thought of, emergency. There's an emergency and he needs some money saving. He never thought of that.
Yeah.
And as a consequence of that, not just once, but a few times, I experienced going 1 or 2 days without food. That's how bad it got.
Mm-hmm.
So when you grow up with that, for me, like today, going without food or not providing for my family is not an option. It doesn't matter how many jobs I have.
Yeah.
I have to work.
Yeah.
So I was telling them to the bar, saying, for example, for me, because of my background and my experience, I'm committed to always provide for my family.
Yeah.
And to make sure they're never going to go without what their basic needs they have.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say that is not because everything I have, I make the decision of, no, it's because my background drove me to that point where I take serious the charge that God gave me to be, a husband, to be a father,
Mm-hmm.
and to provide to them. And I believe by providing to them what they need, I'm actually being a good steward of the money that God gave me.
Yeah.
And I was using this example to show people that what we're talking about here is not just giving money to church.
Yeah.
And I think you did a great job in that message to the bar doing that, because you were very clear about it. You never really stepped into that line saying, okay, now it's time to collect your money. You really didn't. You really said, this is not about the church. This is about your life and how your life is dedicated. So if we dedicate our lives to God, again, if you go back to being a disciple,
Mm-hmm.
How are you using your resources? Think about the areas in your life that God has called you to. Husband, father, mother, co-worker, all those things and involve your resources. How do you dedicate your resources?
Yeah.
Because at the moment that you go and spend all your money on Bengals game and don't provide for your family, well, guess what? Now you're not doing what God told you to do. Every time you go out and spend all your money on gambling, every time you go, you spend all your money on alcohol, all your time you're doing all these things because you can, but you're not spending time with your kids, but you're not spending time with your spouse, but you're not. Those are the things that actually God wanted you to do biblically. Yeah. Now you're not being a good steward. So, hey, this is not about you giving money to church.
Yeah.
Now, on the flip side of that is, yes, as a church, if we manage our money good and we come together, how much stuff can we got done for this community? How many things could we do if we bring our resources together and really decide we're going to impact this community like never before?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where we're at. I think that's where we got to land.
Yeah, and that was the crazy thing is there was a statistic that said, and this doesn't include all because there's so many different denominations, but it included like a chunk of the churches of similar ones to ours, which would fall in, and I'll go with the low number that was given, but that if everyone in the churches tithed, that there would be an extra 151 billion just in the United States churches to do stuff around the world in communities.
Okay. On that note,
That's crazy.
let's take a break. We'll be right back. What makes City Life Plus even more special and better all around is that it is for everyone. This platform has kids content for students, podcasts, music, and traditional content to help you grow Christians. So there really is something for everyone on here. We hope you have had a chance to check it out. If not, please do. We'll be adding new material monthly and we'll post on the social media channels when we do, so make sure to subscribe and follow our social media channels so you know when new content is released. Okay, so on that $100 billion note, it's a lot of money, man.
Yeah, it's crazy. It just shows that it
What
shows there's a lot of money in America.
Oh, my word. Yeah. What would you do? What would you do with $100 billion?
I don't know. I mean, there's a part of me that at this point in life I would buy a lake up in Michigan, buy all the houses, and be like, hey, listen, I'd invite my friends to come up there for free, and I'd just stay there.
Okay, that's okay. Now that we spent $250,000, what are you gonna do?
Yeah. No, I mean, you look at the stuff, and they said with it is with some of those things. I want to say, and I'm old, so my brain's not like it used to, but for $5 million, maybe it's $5 million or $5 billion of it, that around the world we could eradicate. That there's a lot of for a lot of babies and families that mothers and they don't have because now it's probably even worse now. Families expecting a child, and there's all these vitamins and prenatal care, all these things, all these appointments. That I mean, it's crazy that around the world, like, they don't have access to a lot of these things, and so every year there's a number of infants or babies that are born that they don't really have a chance to make it because of health things and lacking the proper vitamins and stuff. And so from that money, essentially the churches around the world could take care of that. None of these, I mean, you'd have your extreme cases, but could drastically almost eliminate all of that. And they talked about this stuff with like clean water and all that stuff that could be for like $40 billion could be taken care of. And so you look at some of the stuff, you're like, man, so just the churches in America, if going back to this commitment thing, or commitment is like, okay, God, we want to use this to make an impact. There's a lot of things that we could fix and take care of if we did that. And sometimes I just wonder, it just goes back to, like, I give people the benefit of the doubt if they know what stuff's going to, but as you said earlier with the bad actors, I think that the difficulty with church and ministry and money is people sometimes they just have in the back of their mind, and it's the tension they wrestle with is, okay, it goes back to a trust issue. I think sometimes they struggle, and people that if I'm generous with my money, like you're talking about your dad, I mean, there's a majority of people don't live that way because they're like, well, I don't know if I'm gonna trust God's gonna provide for me. And I don't know if I can completely trust my church because either they had a bad church experience, they dealt with a bad leader, or they're like every time I see in the news, all the church leaders I see in the news they're bad actors.
No,
So I'm not going to do that. So it all just kind of comes together and makes it a unique situation.
I think it's very interesting. One of the best church memories I have from my dad is that he was always all about transparency, all about it. So in the main hall of the church, there's this probably 10, 12 feet long, wide, backlit panel.
Uh-huh.
And every month, because in Brazil you give monthly to the church, because most Brazilians don't get paid weekly. We get paid monthly. So then people give their finances to the church monthly. So the church really collects money once a month. But what my dad would do is he would print the entire financial report with people's names on it and how much they gave every month. And every month, all that. So, for example, it's a Baptist church. Well, it was a Baptist church. As a Baptist church, you have membership. Membership's a serious thing. So once you become a member, your name is going to go up on the panel, regardless if you gave or not. So entire church would see who gave and how much they gave. And that was every month. And the interesting thing about it is that people thought it was a great idea.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing, I mean, during those years, it was the strongest financial church I've ever been with my dad. I mean, the church was famous for being very faithful financially because their names are up on the screen for everybody to see it. It is just crazy to me. Do you know what the crazy thing is? And this is going to be a little off topic because this culture of exposing on that's coming back, and it's coming back in digital platforms. So there's a type of organization online that is completely transparent. The only way you can be part of it. So everything is publicized. How much money people give for a specific cause. And what kind of role they have because how much money they give, and how the money is spent by the dime, and everybody can see it. And it's growing. Like I'm talking about, like for example, this has to do with crypto. So today, Nigeria, 25% of the currency exchange is already in crypto. Which we already crossed the tipping point, meaning eventually they fear that, or now they fear, but they see that eventually the majority of the country are going to migrate to that kind of a currency. By doing that, everything becomes public. Everything becomes transparent. And that's what people start to. So this is something it's in the future. But I think it's interesting to me that it reminds me of what my dad did in a church where everybody knew who gave, who didn't give, who was a member and didn't give. So the only way for you to not have your name on the panel if you're not a member. But everybody wants to be a member of the Baptist church, right? Everybody wants to have the little card. So everybody says, I'm a member, but when you don't give, your name is there, but the next box is blank. And I thought it was interesting because I never heard of a situation where people would be like, hey, why you're not giving? Nobody would approach anybody with that.
Yeah.
It was just easily like, okay, that for some reason, that person not giving. I think would raise the awareness for people that. Now, I got to give it to my dad. He did a good job of like 6-7 months preparing the church for it. Right? So he's talking about, because I think the thing that helps the most, it was not putting names up there. What helps the most is the last 2 pages that show how much money. I mean, my dad published how much money the staff was getting paid every month on that paper. How much money was spent on utilities? How much money was spent on mortgage. I mean, every month. Here's how much. Here's the bills we pay, and here's how much money is going to. And people just get those numbers every month.
Uh-huh.
So I think it was we talk about bad actors. I think I think transparency is the best way for today for the church to show that, you know, we don't have anything to hide, and here's how we're using the money. But I think the challenge for the church today, and as post COVID, I mean, this when 40 to 60% of the church are not back in the buildings,
Yeah.
I think the challenge becomes, can we do all the things we want to do? Like there's so much that can be done in this Mason area. Can we do all those things today? And why we cannot do them? The things that we cannot do to reach this community, to help this community. I have a teacher at the church, the bar, that every Sunday, never fails, she asks for prayer for her students. And she said every week she's going to the store to buy food to have ready for kids who cannot have food. This is Mason, Ohio.
Yeah.
So how can the church, take a step and help those families? Why cannot the church, not just us, I'm sorry, church around Mason, but we're included here. We're a community here. So what can we do? And some of these things, we're going to need resources. We're going to need the church to trust. We're going to need the church to be faithful. We're going to need the church to believe that God is doing the work here and He's using the leadership for it. So I'm hoping that people will listen. That there's so much that can be done, and we can do it better together.
Yeah. Probably a lot of it just goes back to an intentionality of the conversations and continuing to, and that's to me what will be interesting with the if you look in the digital world. It would seem that in some ways in the digital world you would almost need, more so than even in the building, more transparency, because you could potentially, hey, if here's the stuff that's going on, and maybe the organization is being really transparent with us because they're like, hey, there's nothing to hide. Here's where it's going, so everyone knows with that. And it almost makes me think with some of these needs that there has to be a better way, and for right now is getting those in front of churches, so they can interact better with them, because you go around and you see, I mean, that stuff's way more prevalent than we think, but the old saying, out of sight, out of mind. If people aren't really talking about it or they don't know about it, it's hard for that to be addressed. And so that's part of the, we use the word community around here a lot, is really figuring and kind of nailing down from a community standpoint of, hey, where can we make the best impact? What can we do? And until that becomes a driving force with churches, I mean, you go back and look at Acts, and when it started there, there's this overwhelming commitment to prayer, and this overwhelming commitment to, hey, we're going to look after each other, and we're going to take care of each other. And until that mindset is the prevailing mindset in our churches, I think we run the risk of, as you said, with a teacher at Church at the Bar, of coming in and feeling like, I wish I had more help with this. And I don't know. In some ways you'd think that the church would be there, but it seems like that Big C church in general, we're slow getting to that point. But
do you think we're too tied to, in general, do you think we're too tied to traditions? as a church. Like we're too attached to to the argument of, well, that's how we used to do it.
I think it goes. I think it's Luke 16:9, and we've talked about this a couple weeks. Jesus said, "Use your worldly wealth to." And one of the things we talk about is using the wealth, your resources, to make an eternal impact, to build up your treasures in heaven. And I think part of the stuff, the struggle for us is we like to compartmentalize and separate things, and so that there's been we don't see how for us using resources in the church, it's like, yeah, we'll help missionaries and we'll help these big projects and we'll do stuff in the building, but there's our idea of evangelism or making disciples, we tend to view it from the lens of, okay, this is how I make a disciple. I'm going to tell someone about Jesus. I'm going to walk them through the basic steps of faith, and then they'll be a disciple, and not realizing that the discipleship process can come through a variety of ways. Mm-hmm. And so with some of it is the initial thing of using your resources that you have to whatever it is, providing for people. I mean, you look at the beginning of the church in Acts, they were coming together, and if people had need, they were providing for them. And you can't separate there was the apostles' teaching and all that stuff going on. There's this apostle teaching, there was prayer, and it said people were coming and being generous, and when someone had need, they would take care of them. And so you kind of see that spiritual needs were being taken care of, physical needs were being taken care of, and what was happening? They were adding to their number daily. But for us, sometimes I think we have that distinction of we've spiritual needs and physical needs. We keep those things apart, and we don't think that helping meet physical needs can eventually or can help bring someone into the kingdom for eternity. And when we kind of marry those things back together and realize the impact that they both have, then I think we'd see more of a change. But I think for some reason today in the church, it's just we don't necessarily think of it with like, well, that's why they got parachurch organizations.
Exactly, right.
Or the government.
It is interesting. Last week, I was in Indianapolis having several meetings, and one of them was kind of like in the afternoon, and I'm in the room with 5 other guys. 4 of them are very successful. All 5 are very successful businessmen, all millionaires, except one of them is actually on a B. He's a billionaire. And we end up engaging this conversation about church and missions, local and global. And as we have these conversations, it was interesting to see because this guy's very business mind driven. They love God, but they are very business driven. And we're talking about, the challenges for the church today because they're in their own local churches, they're seeing the same challenges, right? People are not coming back in the building, or people are not doing this, or then jumping to, well, I don't want to give that much money to the pastor because we're just feeding people for free. We should teach people to fish, not just give the fish. Like again, it's a very common mindset for people with that background because they had to work hard to build what they have. So at one point, one of them turned to me and said, the church just should back off a little bit because when they look at us, all they see is dollar signs. And I said, that's fine. Let me just ask you a question. You believe in God, right? Yeah. Do you believe you're a disciple of Christ? Yes. I said, then tell me, what is your kingdom size mission, personally? Don't tell me about, help your employee Because one of them said, no, I just do that when I can. I sit with my employees and I want to be an impact. Say, yeah, this is not kingdom size mission. What's your kingdom size that's bigger than you? And you all got a lot. So what's your kingdom size that you look at and is like, God, I don't know if I can do this because it's bigger than me. What is that?
Yeah.
Do you have one? Or you just settle for the little things that can make you feel good?
Yeah.
And man, it felt like I dropped this bomb in the middle of the room. But it was interesting. Next morning, a couple of these guys called me and said, dude, thank you very much. I didn't sleep last night. And they start talking about it. I said, actually, I never had that thought. I think I do good things, but I never had that challenge of somebody that's bigger than what I have in my bank account, which was very humbling for him to say that. And I think it starts to help shift. But I think you don't have to be a millionaire. And I told that story at the bar Sunday, and I told them, you don't have to be a millionaire to have that challenge. It doesn't matter how much money you have in your bank account. What is your kingdom size mission? What's your kingdom size dream?
Yeah.
And to the point where you gotta trust God to accomplish that, but you know you don't have any other way out because you're being called to that mission. What is that mission in your life? What are you guys calling you for you to accomplish that it's way bigger than you, but you know it's from Him? And I think the challenge for us today is that it's walking away with like, what's your kingdom size mission here? You can argue all day long about technicality of the church. It doesn't take away the fact that all of us, God has a mission, and are we going after that? So that's what I got.
Yeah, I agree with it. It's at some point people need to connect the dots that God has put you where He's at, or He's blessed you, and through life He uses situations, circumstances, life experiences for reasons. Like you're not just where you're at because happen chance. It's like you're there because there's always a purpose. But when it goes back to this thing with commitment, it's real simple. I mean, you're either committed to yourself or you're committed to God. And if there's not those kingdom things, those big things you're going to, you're committed to self, and people are going to have some uncomfortable conversations with Jesus when He says, hey, you do realize what you had was part of my plan, and I was the one that blessed you with that. But what I'm trying to figure out now is why you just wasted those blessings I gave you on nothing of significance. And sometimes I wonder if they'll say, and you see this person over here, man, they had a tenth of what you had, but look at the treasures they have here in heaven versus you. Like, yeah, you got a Home Depot $30 a little closet shed that you can open up, and you got 2 shelves. Like, they've got a 200,000 square foot compound of their heavenly treasures, and they had half what you had. So,
yeah,
go over there, and by the way, you're the pool boy for them.
Is that
That'd be awesome. Like, I don't think it's gonna happen, but sometimes I think that would make it. That'd be so good.
It comes down to the attitude.
Yeah,
it comes down to the attitude.
So,
about money.
I mean, you think Matt would be our pool boy in heaven?
I think he's still going to be. I mean, I don't think he can. I think regardless how much he got, he's just going to be the pool boy. I mean, I don't have any question about that.
Yeah, that's probably really bad theology, but
I hope God has a really, 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 really big pool in my house, so that way he's going to have to work hard for it.
Yeah. I just hope he's not wearing FC Cincinnati gear when he's doing it.
Oh man, or his Bengals game somewhere.
Yeah. Well, by the time this drops, we're going to be close to World Cup, aren't we?
Yes. I mean, he's coming. We're going to have to take a break here.
Yeah,
we're going to have to do the podcast with the TV on.
Yeah, or do the podcast at B-Dubs.
Yeah,
I change the menu around. That way we can, yeah. Is the U.S. in the World Cup this year?
Yes.
So, all right, that would be. I know some people won't like this, but that's my favorite thing is because then the quote people will jump on the bandwagon. I'll be like, hey, it's great that you're coming watch a soccer game. You hadn't been since what they lost to Portugal way back in the day. It's like I didn't even realize the U.S. men played soccer on the national stage anymore. But
word.
all these, who's their best player? Like Pulisic or whatever, Christian whatever. Some young guy on the U.S. national team.
Oh, I don't know. I don't follow.
Yeah, I mean though.
I don't follow I'm with you on that. I don't even. Then it's hard to know when they're playing or they're not playing. So
I mean, right now everyone's crazy about FC Cincinnati.
Because there's a Brazilian there. The guy stinks, but that's okay.
I don't even if they are. People will be like, "Hey, would you go to a game?" Absolutely not. Absolutely not, man. It's just I go to a lot of my JV football games. Watching are over, but
I know that. I mean, Matt loves the FCC because the family affair. He goes with his son-in-law, and they can have fun.
That's gonna be. They may even have a wedding down there.
Well, that note, we cannot just close this thing without talking about Matt. So that's why we're doing this.
Yeah. We just love the guy.
But I'll see you soon. Ooh, we need to talk about the holidays pretty soon here, so we'll do next session.
Sounds good.
Later.
See you.
Thanks for joining us this week on Let's Talk Podcast. Make sure to check us out at ccliveplus.com, where you can listen to past episodes and subscribe to the show in iTunes, Spotify, and other podcast platforms. And one more thing. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a rating on iTunes and tell someone about the show. Until next time.